Morning. How we doing? Hope you're well. Had an interesting chat over the weekend, so I thought I'll mention some of it today. It was an acquaintance of mine, and we are talking about, mental health issues, I suppose. And there was this kind of point which I hear occasionally about, oh, well, you're a psychotherapist or psychologist or therapist or whatever, counselors. You make a trauma out of everything. You basically say, well, everything that happens to a person is traumatized and is traumatic. Sorry, and people are traumatized very easily these days. They get upset by everything. You can't say anything these days, and so on. You know the rant. You know the narrative I'm talking about here. And I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about what we in counseling or psychotherapy talk about when we talk about trauma. Um, and I think somewhere, in my acquaintances sort of fairly ill-informed rant, there is a mild point, which is this. There is a book written by two sociologists in the 70s, which I'll drop in the comments, and they talk about the loss of sadness, and the point is that sadness, upset, unhappiness, an element of anxiety, stress, and so on, they are evolutionary feelings, and actually they're part of the human condition. So, a great fault with psychiatry is that they've pathologized all these feelings, and therefore nobody can feel sad these days without automatically thinking they have some sort of mental health issue. Again, the narrative here being that people are less resilient than they used to be. We essentially get anxious and unhappy a lot easier than we used to, and we're just not as uh, prepared to put up with the stress than we used to. And there's a fair point in a sense that yes, sadness is part of life, and yes, an element of stress and anxiety is part of our daily existence. So there's elements of being able to cope with such feelings. But, and there is a but, when we talk about trauma in therapy, we're not talking about the fact that we didn't get our way, or the fact that the world doesn't seem to pay us necessarily the same, the amount of attention we think we deserve. We're talking about an experience in our past which was deeply traumatic, which actually caused a lot of distress, mental distress. Now, the way we know it's traumatic is because it has long lasting impacts, and the symptoms are both physical and mental. Now, the important point here, so for example, if we experience a crime, or if we experience some very distressing situation, we could potentially have traumatic impact. That could have a traumatic impact on our mental health development or on our mental health well-being. The point here is that trauma has to have a lasting impact to be considered trauma, and also has to have a certain sort of number of symptoms, if you like. But even more importantly, and this is, I think, is the crucial point which I was trying to explain to my acquaintance, is that trauma is different for different people. What some people will find deeply distressing, other people won't necessarily even potentially notice, or even bat an eyelid at. What other people find absolutely irrelevant, for other people, that might be actually a life-changing event. Now, I'll give you a very quick example from my experience, for something which a client of mine found traumatic, and to which you and I might not necessarily think twice about it. So this person has left the family home in a family in which they weren't particularly appreciated, or with whom he didn't really have a very close relationship to. Anyway, one of the things that happened when they left home is they left a pet behind. Now, because the accommodation that they were staying in didn't accept pets, so they had to leave this pet behind. Now, regular visits, going back home for holidays and so on, he noticed that um, more and more the stuff he left behind, whether it were clothes, books, or whatever, that sort of possessions of his just got thinner and thinner and thinner, as in his parents got rid of everything almost gradually. And the last thing was that almost that was of his in the family home was this pet. And one holiday, when he came home to visit the parents, whatever, the pet was also gone. And funnily enough, that was the thing that really stuck with him and really traumatized him, because you and I will think, well, getting rid of a tortoise or whatever it was, I can't even remember, to be honest, is not such a big deal, especially as you're an adult now, you've moved on, excuse me, you have your own life and so on. But for him, That was the last bit of him in the family home, and getting rid of that pet signified to him that essentially his parents really wanted him gone completely, and he was almost not welcome, or that wasn't his home anymore. So that could cause an element of trauma in him, emotional trauma, because he just felt that he was thrown out completely. Now, incidentally, obviously, this possessions disappearing and his pet disappearing wasn't with his permission or even with his accord. He didn't know anything about this. He just came back to find more and more of his stuff gone, to the point where the pet was gone as well. But because he was so attached to this pet, it was essentially the final straw. So you and I might think that, well, you're an adult, you move on, it's pets, whatever. But actually, he had such a connection with this particular, again, whatever it was, I can't even remember, that they grew up together to some extent, and there was some sort of emotional support for this person, that the removal of this pet actually caused him quite a lot of angst and distress, and actually brought back a lot of memories about childhood experiences that were negative, and that he's forgotten. So in a sense, what we mean here is a traumatic event, because it did have a significant emotional impact on this person. Other people might find this, completely irrelevant. Oh, yeah, pet's gone, whatever, or my sweater's gone, or whatever, irrelevant. But in this case, that could be considered to be a traumatic event. So the point here really is that trauma is not the same for everyone. It affects people in a different way. Different things affect people in a different way, and it is a valid thing, provided, as I say, it does kind of qualify as a significant element of distress for a person. So no, we're not great fans of just finding everything traumatic in the therapy room. Trust me, we're not. Actually,